Hello everyone and welcome to our virtual library where we try and deliver you the best service we can when the physical buildings are shut. So today I've got a real treat for you. It's a author interview with Louise Hare. She's the author of This Lovely City, her debut novel, which I read and absolutely loved. So I'm very glad to welcome Louise here today. Hello.
Hello, thank you for having me.
So could you, for those people who have never heard about your book, could you please tell us very generally what it is about, and maybe if you'd like to read a bit from it as well.
Yeah. So it is a story of Laurie and Evie, who are a couple, and it's set mostly in 1950. With some flashback scenes to 1948, which is when Laurie came over from Jamaica on the Windrush. And it's partly a love story, but it's a murder mystery in essence. At the end of the first chapter, Laurie makes a grim discovery as he's crossing Clapham Common and basically ends up being the suspect in a murder case. So that is kind of how it all kicks off. And then how I actually started writing the book was it was a short story. I did an MA in creative writing at Birkbeck, and I wrote this short story about this guy's sort of first day in London after he arrives from Jamaica and how weird he's finding everything. And the main feedback was that people wanted to know what happened to him afterwards. So that was how I got the best idea for the book. So I'm going to read from. So that short story is basically a chapter of the novel now.
Okay.
The first 1948 chapter, so I'm just going to read a little bit from there. Laurie waited patiently, leaning against the rough brick of the pillbox wall and trying to look as though he belonged. He occupied his time by watching the people walking past, staring down the curious glances of the pale-faced Clapham locals as he tried once more to calculate how far he would go until he found work. If the bus was 4p from here to Coldharbour Lane, then how many journeys could he make until he was broke? How much would he have to pay out for rent? And how much was a loaf of bread? Not to mention the expense of clothing. He was all right for now, but once the seasons changed, he'd freeze to death unless he invested in jumpers. He was already cold. They called this summer because they knew no better. God help him when winter did come. He was shivering in the sunlight. People hurried along in their coats, umbrellas in hand, hats firmly pushed down and pinned into hairdos that had never been vexed by humidity, like his mother's each Sunday as she fixed it up for church. Laurie wore both the new jumpers she'd bought him as a leaving present, the arms of his jacket tight, unused to the bulk. He had thought of buying a scarf earlier in the day, only the shop assistant had made him feel anxious as he followed him around menswear, just as well.
Ooh, thank you. So it started as a one short story. What made you to pick up this subject in the first place of the experience of the person newly arrived from Jamaica?
Yeah, so where Laurie is actually standing in that chapter is outside Clapham South Tube Station. And I did you can do tours into like the old tubes around London. You can just book them online and go along. And there was one that went into Clapham South Tube Station where there's a deep level shelter, which they used as an aero shelter in World War II. And when I got down there, there were pictures of Windrush passengers, and I found out that actually a lot of the people that arrived on the Windrush, if they didn't have anywhere to go, they just kind of bussed them to Clapham South and put them into the deep level shelter. So a lot of the men actually lived in those tunnels for like the first couple of weeks until they sort of went and got jobs. And the nearest sort of labour exchange was Brixton, which is why Brixton then had quite sort of developed that sort of Caribbean community. And I just started thinking how weird that must be if you've just been on a ship, travelled overseas, not only arrived in a strange country, but then you get shipped underground. Like, what? You just be like, what have I done? Where have I come to? Yeah. So that's kind of the starting point.
That's fantastic. So how did it end up with to being a book in the end?
So Laurie's in the short story, and then I'd had an idea I'd been working on for about a year on and off which I couldn't quite get to work, and it was going to be a murder mystery. It was actually going to be set in World War II, and I had a main character called Evie, who was mixed race, and there just wasn't enough to make that like a full story. I was missing something, and then when I realised that I had this sort of new character of Laurie, and I had like his friends, and then he got a sort of a situation. When I put the two together, that kind of made the whole story. So then it was just sort of tweaking a few bits to see what would work and what wouldn't.
Great. I just love hearing how the authors come up with the ideas for the book. So some of them will say, oh, I just started writing it and it just like flew along. And for some of them, it's such a massive process of a book being not substantial enough. So there's certain things being added to it that actually made it into the wholesome story, which is an amazing thing to happen. From like, I can read a book, but I don't think I'll be able to write a book sort of like in such way that actually makes sense, and also to be actually very interesting as well. Anyway, going back to the book. So you mentioned in one of your interviews that London was like your main third main character. How important was it actually to describe London how it was then in the 50s?
Yeah, I think there's a lot that is similar now. So I remember when I first moved to London and I had no money, getting the bus around was actually really easy way. Like I've had a season ticket, then every bus you get is free essentially from then on.
Yeah.
So I'd spend just weekends getting buses from, I actually used to live just off Clapham Common, just like getting buses into central London, just jumping on random buses just to see where they went. And so I kind of like that idea for like Laurie and Eve. That's why there's quite a few bus journeys. There's quite a lot of time on the Common because that was again like a cheap way to spend an afternoon, just sort of walk around the Common. And there's lots of hidden stories, like sort of setting the scene in the Lyceum, which at the time would have been a ballroom. Now obviously it's back to being a theatre. And there's just so much history. Bram Stoker worked there. There are these buildings in London that have layer upon layer of history and all these different stories to them, and I was just like really interested in sort of digging some of those out and putting my characters into them basically.
And how much research did you do when you were writing about the Brixton and the Clapham Common and all those parts that obviously have changed now? Did you go on a tours? Did you read a lot about this?
Yeah, I tried to read about things, and I actually read quite a lot of fiction. There's some really good books that were written at the time. So Sam Salva's Lonely Londoners, I read that a few times, and also E.R. Braithwaite, To Sir With Love. So they were written by men who had travelled from the Caribbean to the UK that lived in the 50s, that sort of went through these different experiences. So that was really useful to sort of see how they sort of experienced the city in terms of, when they were walking down the street, what they were thinking about different things that they were seeing. And then obviously looking at really basic things like just looking through 1950s history and seeing what was still rationed in 1950, because some things were, some things weren't. So having those little facts in there as well was quite interesting.
I always ask this question: did you research at the library?
Yeah, I did quite a lot. I got quite a lot of books out of the library actually, because you can just search them and then reserve them, which was really handy. And then just keep renewing them until
Okay. So this book is also about the community and the relationships between the people, and I thought it was quite interesting how you portrayed not only relationships between the community and Black community, the Black Caribbean community coming to UK, but also those on a personal level. Particularly interesting was the relationship with Evie and her mother. Can we talk about this a bit as well?
So yeah, I mean, theirs was it kind of developed over the course of the book, and actually thinking about so obviously Agnes is quite a hard woman, but then actually when you think about it, she's a single mother, her daughter mixed race, So she sort of had 18 years of being an outcast, essentially. Her dad kicked her out, and she went to mother and baby's home to give birth, and then sort of made this decision to keep her daughter. But then obviously over time, she loves Evie, but she has sort of grown to resent her as well, because she's like, I could have had a husband, I could have had a normal family. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of explore that and think, I mean, she is bitter about a lot of things, but I don't think she's necessarily a bad person, if that makes sense. She's horrible to her daughter at times, but she does do a lot for her as well. So I think, yeah, it was very interesting writing their relationship.
Yeah, I could not decide whether I like Agnes or not, because she is clearly on her own, completely outcasted. No, she has no friends, no real friends. The only actual relationship she's got left from her past is with her sister, and she's just clinging to that. And her treatment of her daughter was not very nice at some point, but then again, she's just what some people would sometimes describe as a harsh mother, but harsh but fair. So
Yeah.
she feeds her, she clothes her. She's just not that very maternal, I would say. You would never know how she would behave if her daughter was if the daughter was, if they had a part normal family. So you've got no idea how she would behave then, or how much of that is just resentment that this whole situation is sort of like, in a way, because of her daughter. So I thought that was very interesting as well. Did you do so the other thing I was thinking about is the relationships between not only the families but the friendships and the community feel that surrounds the main characters as well in this book. So how much research did you do about the Windrush communities coming to London and being welcomed to the communities that already been there? Because I thought that was very interesting how that was described.
Yeah, so I did go to, we've got the Black Cultural Archives in Brixton on Wimbledon Square, and I actually went into their reading room, and they had some sort of first-person testimonies. So they'd sort of been like transcripts basically of conversations. So these guys talking about, a lot of them had been fighting in the war, had gone back and then gone back to like Jamaica or wherever, come back expecting to be welcome, because they had been welcomed when they were in England during the war, because obviously they were sort of fighting for the country. And actually a lot of them came back and were quite shocked by how their treatment changed, because the attitude kind of was, well, yeah, but we wanted you then because we had a purpose. Like, what's your purpose now? You should just go back. So it's quite interesting reading that and how shocked they were in terms of the living conditions, because a lot of places just wouldn't rent to people. So yeah, so I read a lot of that and sort of walking around the streets of Brixton, because some of those buildings are still there, some of them aren't, and just sort of imagining, what that must have been like, essentially.
What I find fascinating is okay, fascinating might be the wrong word. Everyday racism in this book, it's an eye-opening for the white person to read, in a way, how way back it goes. It is microaggressions. As I say, lots of people just weren't, allowing Black people to work, to live, or to entertain the same places. And reading about it, how it all sort of, how people trying to build their new lives for themselves in this hostile communities as well. That was very interesting part of your book as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of people arrived here and were quite shocked, and also I think a lot of them couldn't afford to go back home because it's like a lot of people have used savings to get this ticket to come to the UK, and then it's like, well, I don't have a choice. I have to get on with this. I have to find a job, and then if I'm lucky, I can save up. And then a lot of people did save up, and a lot of people stayed 5-10 years and then went back because they just had enough. And then other people stayed and had families. So it was quite a mixed bag of reactions, I guess, as well, depending on whether you were on your own or whether you had a family to support. There were all these different sort of variables, I guess, whether people thought it was worth sort of persisting or not.
So in this book, at the very beginning, so there's no spoilers involved here. At the very beginning, Laurie is basically involved in he finds a body of a small child, and immediately he becomes a suspect. What was the intention of sort of like talking to writing about what it eventually is? It's a murder mystery. How does it end up with having this element in it?
Yeah, so the murder mystery element was part of the sort of the two things that I put together. So that was when I was trying to write a book with Evie. Although in that book that wasn't working, she was kind of a lot more removed from the situation, and it just sort of made sense that Laurie would be in that place, I guess, and he would have been under suspicion. Like, I don't think there would be any doubts at that time that he would have been under suspicion. So I think that was just kind of how it sort of evolved. And then sort of think about what, I guess the rest of the book is sort of thinking about what led it to that point and why was somebody so desperate that they killed this child. I mean, that's kind of, I guess the book's kind of a whodunit as well as a whodunit, because you want to know why, someone would resort to this, essentially.
Yes, that's right. Okay. Going back to the book itself, the main concept, the music is also very important in this book. So why did you make jazz such a big part of it as well? Or I should also mention, for those who might not know, that in an audiobook, which I listened to as well, there was specifically commissioned, part of the music commission for the audiobook as well, that plays throughout the book.
Yeah, so we got some students at ELAM, which is East London Arts and Music Academy. They've got a jazz band, and we asked them to compose some original jazz music for the audiobook, which is brilliant.
I love that part. It was so good, and just so fitted so well in the whole idea of it.
Yeah, it was really good. I was really sad, actually, because around the book launch, which was middle of March, they were going to be playing at Waterstones Piccadilly, and obviously with sort of coronavirus and everything, we had to sort of cancel all the events around it.
Oh no.
So yeah, we're going to have loads of live jazz and things, but if you get the audiobook, then you can listen to it.
Yes, it's definitely worth it. But why did you major jazz as a part of the book as well? Why to make Laurie a musician?
So that was, again, just something I sort of threw in at when I was writing the short story. And it was partly because I read that there were a lot of musicians on the Windrush. And I play clarinet myself a little bit, so it kind of made sense to me to give him that instrument, and it's a really easy way to give someone friends, to put them into a band, because then you've got the bandmates, so you don't even have to think about how they all know each other. They met on the ship, they formed this band. That's really a cheap way of giving someone a load of friends, and then you've got your characters. And then jazz, again, was just like easy. I listened to quite a lot of jazz, and it was an easy way to put him into like Soho and sort of build these little scenarios for Laurie. And then I got to listen to lots of jazz when I was writing to get me in the mood, so that was good.
Did you prepare like a playlist for the music that you listen to, or to fit into it?
Yeah, I just sort of listen to random stuff, but I don't know if it's still there, actually. I think if you go on Spotify, my publisher did make a playlist. I think it was just called This Lovely City. So you have a look and see if it's still there. I don't know how Spotify playlists work properly, but yeah, it might still be there.
I'll definitely make sure I'll check that out because I love the jazz element in the book as well very much. Okay, so it's quite a lot of bad things happening in this book. Obviously, there is this community is not being treated very well. There's a murder mystery and suspicions and not very good relationships about between the certain characters. But do you think, because that was my impression, do you think it's also a book about hope?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the ending is, and it ends on a quite a hopeful note. But also, you know, it's not all doom and gloom. Like, you do have this relationship between Laurie and Evie that's, you know, generally going quite well. And there's quite a lot of lighter moments with like Laurie and his friends and Aston, who's sort of his sort of accidental friend that he inherited from his brother. So yeah, I think there's lots of you can imagine them sort of carry on afterwards and what they might get up to, you know.
I must say, I really liked the ending because it sort of gives a bit of a sort of, well, as I said, it gives a bit of a hope that despite how hard the lives must have been, there was something in the, you know, the end of the tunnel for people. And that was nice to think. I was like, actually, yes, it maybe in X amount of time, they'll have this house and here and there, a lot of children. So this is one of the elements I really liked about this book. It's people trying to go through the hardships, just sort of thinking about the better future ahead of them, which I thought was a very good positive message as well.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to end on, a, you know, a little bit of an upward.
do you think your book fits in this this trend of uplit and a positive literature at the moment?
I don't really know what sort of fits that. I don't know if it's. I don't think it's a heavy book, but I don't know if it's light enough for uplit. I'm not sure. Maybe it's on the cusp of uplit. I'm not sure.
I certainly would recommend it for people who are looking for sort of for books that as I said, that just bring the hope for the better. Because I think what the uplit is about, it's about a sort of finding a positive and good in the certain hardships and hard times. I'm not saying that sort of relates particularly to this day and age, but you know, there's definitely that message in it as well.
Yeah.
Okay, and the other thing I wanted to ask you about is obviously the presence of Black British women in the book. So Evie's mixed race. There are other characters as well. What was important to write down about the particularly the female character as well?
I think I was very interested in, you know, because it's 1950, so I think a lot of women in the book suffer because they're women. So, you know, Agnes being a single mother, ostracized. Even Rose, who is sort of a more minor character in the book, has sort of found herself in this marriage where she just doesn't feel fulfilled. Like, she went through World War II and doing all this amazing stuff that she was suddenly allowed to do, and then it's just expected that after the war she goes back to being a housewife. And then with Evie as well, like, I really wanted to, I guess, because Windrush is the best time Black people arrived in this country, which obviously isn't true. And I generally write historical fiction, and I was kind of shying away from Windrush. I wanted to write something set earlier to kind of disprove that sort of myth. But then when I came up with the idea for this book, I was like, well, I feel like I need to write this book, but I have to have characters that are Black and clearly were in London before Windrush, just to show that, and to show that, you know, it wasn't this new thing entirely. Also to explore what that must have been like to be, you know, often be the only person who looked the way that you did.
Do you think it's enough in the current book market? Is there enough similar books as well, so similar to yours, that's sort of showing that the people lived here between, you know, before the influx from Caribbean, that there was always a Black community in Britain?
I'd like to see more. I think I've struggled in the past to find historical fiction that shows Black characters in a way that I feel like they should be shown, if that makes sense. I think certainly in the last few years I've read more historical fiction books that have a minor Black character, but generally they've, to me, follow stereotypes. They're written by white authors, and I think they've got it wrong slightly. Or I just thought, I really want to write my own book because I want to explore how I feel about these things and how, I think my life would have been different if I'd been living at this time. And that was really important to me. I think going forward, I'm going to go further back. My next book's going to be set in 1936. And then I think after that, I want to go back into like Georgian period, or, and really explore. Because actually, the Georgian period, there was quite a big Black community in London, especially, and Bristol, all the shipping ports, which is to do with slavery. So I'd like to explore that, but have Black characters who are the lead characters as well, which I think is quite important to me.
So does that mean you're working on a new novel now?
Yeah, so I'm actually just waiting for my edits back on book 2, which is it's another murder mystery, but it's a lot more murder mystery. Like there's multiple. It's mainly set on a ship. So on the Queen Mary, traveling from Southampton to New York. My main character is a jazz singer who grew up in London but is mixed race again. And she sort of gets stuck on the ship and starts dying. And she sort of gets implicated. So it's a bit. I was going for like a sort of Agatha Christie / Patricia Highsmith kind of hybrid style. So we'll see what my editor has said when she's read it.
That sounds exciting. That sounds really something I really, really, really would like to read. So please don't forget about us. Just finishing up, if people wanted to find you on social media, where can they find you?
I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, and I have a website that I've actually updated recently because I've had all this time, which is louisehare.com. And those are the main places. And
do you have any events if people would like to listen to you talking more about your book? Where can they do that? Do you have anything coming up in this situation?
So I've done an event with the Big Book Weekend, which is a free online literary festival, and my event was with Beth Morrie, who wrote Saving Missy, which is definitely uplit and a really good book. And that, I believe, is going to be on, I know it's the Saturday, which I think is the 9th of May, at 3 p.m. So if you check out Big Book Weekend, you'll find the link to go and join. Great, fantastic. And just to say, the book is available also on our ebook catalogue. If you would like to borrow it and read it, I'll link it down below so you can go and check it yourself. I just wanted to say thank you very much, Louise, for agreeing to come to the meeting today and have a lovely chat with us about your book. Go and read it, because it's really worth it. I thought it was great. And normally I would just give people a round of applause, but this time I'll have to just do it myself. So thank you very much for coming and talking about us about the book. Thank you.